There's no question that we're living in very trying, confusing times. And the divisiveness that's being portrayed, projected, promoted, propagated has probably been the worst that it's ever been in my life. And I would argue maybe the history of our country, with the exception of the Civil War. Now, because of my upbringing, I guess my genetic makeup, I really don't have the convenience of picking a side in a fight, because in my lifetime I've been castigated by both sides for being part of the other. So luckily for me, I had to develop my own personality and not fall victim to the racist shit, like the victimhood or the superiority complex of it. I just learned how to deal with people for what they were on the inside, not so much on the outside. Now I've got a lot of friends on both sides of the racial divide, and we've had a couple of conversations about the way things go. And you know, my stance is pretty simple, and I'll give you an example of that in a story. When I was on my extended vacation in the Texas penitentiary system, I got shipped to a unit that was in West Texas that was really divided. The penitentiary is divided anyway along racial lines. You're supposed to stay within your race and do all of that silly shit. But again, because the way that I grew up, the way that I came through my life, I didn't subscribe to that. And an incident happened one day with a guy named Blocker. I don't remember his first name because we didn't call each other by our first names. His name was Blocker. And he was a white guy. He was a skinhead. He had a swastika on the side of his head. He had Aryan Brotherhood tattoos all over his body. And, you know, that's who he rolled with. Well, I had a lot of conversations with the guy because he was a pretty cool dude. You know, his circumstances led him to be the person he was out of necessity. And that's pretty much the way we all come up. We are just a product of our environment until we make a conscious decision that, you know, we don't want to be that, or, you know, we decide to take the reins of our lives. Well, when I got moved to this unit, you know, Blocker was a stand-up guy. He wasn't a coward. And he would stand too against anyone. You know, it didn't matter if he was going to get his ass whooped. He was a man. And he had some beef with this dude that was on the streets. He was a crackhead. He was a scrub. He was just a roach. He was a black guy. And whatever their beef was, the population of black guys that were in the penitentiary, they wired up this worm to get at Blocker. They didn't like him because, you know, he was a man and he stood against dumb shit. And, you know, he didn't back down, and they didn't like it. Nobody really wanted to go directly at him themselves because, you know, he was about that action. And so they sent this crash dummy at him and, you know, propped him up, backed him up. And what this guy did was he waited till the Blocker was on the toilet. He waited till the guy went down and sat down on the toilet. And he crept up, you know, on him, and he had some sort of canned good in a sock, and that was wrapped in a pillowcase. And, you know, dude was sitting on the toilet, and this coward comes up behind him and just busts him upside the head with it. And I'm sitting in my cell, and the bathroom is right by where I'm at. And I see this go down, and it happened so quick I couldn't warn him. But he busted just this big gash in the dude's head, and, you know, Blocker gets up, he's pissed. And, you know, he goes to get at this guy, and the fucking coward runs out the door, and all the black dudes basically create a wall and forbid Blocker to take action against the guy. And that, in that moment, that infuriated me so bad, because that was wrong. If that had happened to me, I would have done something bad to each and every one of those guys that stopped me from getting at this dude. And I lost it, man. I lost my shit. And I stood beside this guy, and I was willing to fight every one of those guys. We would have got aired out, no doubt. But it made me so mad that these guys allowed that coward to do that. There were no color lines. There was no any of that. It was wrong. It was wrong, and that it happened on my watch. And I was willing to go all the way the distance with this dude not because of any loyalty to him or any of that. That's what I got accused of, loving the white boy and all of this stupid black racism shit. I was supposed to be on their side simply because this dude was kind of the same color as me. He had no worth as a man. He was a fucking roach. And they knew it. They knew he was a roach. But this guy was so starved for attention and acceptance from these dudes, he ran up and did that, and then they protected him. And, I stood next to that guy, and I was willing to go to war with him, and have his six on that, because it was absolutely wrong. And in spite of all those dudes looking at me, trying to call me out of my name as a man, saying all of the stupid shit that people say, that believe that they're entitled to do something because of the color of their skin or vice versa. I don't believe in that shit at all. And it makes me angry when people just assume that I'm supposed to be a part of their ignorance. Now, what happened in that situation was those dudes, I don't think that they understood what was going on. Because there were two dudes that were willing to go to war with them, and it was on them to make the move. We weren't going to engage them, but they were not going to impose anything further. And so it basically was an impasse. But during that impasse, I explained to each and every one of those dudes why I was standing next to this guy and what I would do to them if they did that to me. And from that point forward, I didn't really have any problems at that unit anymore. And what ended up happening is the guys that I wasn't supposed to talk to, and I wasn't supposed to deal with, the whites and the Mexicans, I ended up being super tight with them, as well as the black guys, the black men in there who were rational thinkers. And what's my point of this is this. Right now, there's a lot of bandwagons. There's a lot of dumb shit that you can become involved with. There's a lot of things that you can do to go along with dummies that may look like you, may be like you, may act like you. They might be in your family. But what we need right now is not we don't need sheep following sheep. What we need is men doing the right thing. Just because somebody's a certain color does not give them a pass to do anything, nor does it make them guilty of anything. Nobody wants to be held accountable for things that they didn't do. And doing these things, supporting these things, you're part of a problem, not a solution. Now, what's the answer here? The answer is pretty simple. Do what's right, not what's popular. Do what's right, not what's easy. Do what's right, not what feels good. That's how we start to put a Band-Aid on this sick nation that we live in. Men, stand up. Stand up. It's time for us to stand up and do the right thing. Out.